Welcome to Marketing Demystified, the podcast that connects the dots for business leaders to drive revenue through effective marketing strategy. We chat with marketing experts on different topics that will help you ramp up your revenue. We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms. Marketing Demystified, the podcast, is presented to you by GrowGetter, your partner in growth marketing. And here's today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered with actionable tips to transform your marketing game? You're in the right place. Welcome to Marketing Demystified. I'm your host, Jenn Mancusi, CEO and co-founder of GrowGetter, your growth marketing partner. Today, we're talking about one of the biggest decisions growing businesses face. Should you build your own marketing tech stack from scratch or buy an all-in-one solution? To help us navigate these questions, I'm joined by Dave Melillo, data platform expert, adjunct instructor at UPenn's Coding Bootcamp, and former VP of Data and Analytics at OnRamp. Dave's built infrastructure for VC-backed startups and Fortune 500 companies alike, and he's here to demystify what founders and CEOs really need to know when making these decisions. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Hi, thanks, Jen. Appreciate you having me.
So happy to have you on today. I think this is, navigating tech stack can be so scary and a lot of questions come up all the time about which direction to go. So I'm excited to dive in today.
Yeah, likewise.
So I think one of the things that, sort of comes up a lot is, when should we be using like plug and play tools versus when might somebody need a custom data infrastructure? I guess if you're a smaller company, you're not even thinking about custom data, but should you be?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't think that there's a silver bullet or a right answer to any of this, right? Like with technology in general, I think you can find a solution in many different ways. What I would say though is one of like the main decision vectors for when I'm thinking about, if I'm going to buy or build, it's speed, right? So I think if you're trying to move fast, sometimes buying all-in-one solutions, things like that can be really beneficial because you can just worry about the business problems that you're trying to solve. You don't have to really think about some of the infrastructure considerations and trials and tribulations that you have to go through that way. I just do think the trade-off that you make there is in your ceiling, right? And how much you can do with that all-in-one tech stack. And we could talk about that a little bit more as we go on. But the simple answer to that, I think, is if you value speed over everything else, then going, with a turnkey solution, let's call it, is probably the best way to get started.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess maybe we could even take a step further back for people who are listening and wondering, well, what do we even mean when we're talking about tech stack? Are we talking about a CRM? Are we talking about automation platforms? Are we talking about data analytics? What are some of the tech considerations from a marketing perspective that companies should be thinking about when they're looking for a solution?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I don't really separate what you have to do with marketing and sales with what you have to do in data in general. So I have a lot of paraphernalia out there on the internet about building a data platform, right? So all of those guidelines are the same for marketing and sales, right? So when you talk about the things that you have to do, you have to ingest data. You're always going to have a myriad of data sources that, flux between first party, third party, whatever party, right? You need to be able to connect all those data sources very easily and put them in one physical location, right? Because that's like usually where most people trip up. They have, they have all their contacts in HubSpot. They are doing a bunch of stuff in Salesforce. They also have like SalesLoft, and there's all of these different solutions, and it creates data sprawl. So like the number one step to like building your marketing or sales platform is being able to connect all your sources and get them in one place, right? So that also speaks to storage. You have to have some idea of a storage solution, like where you're going to put all this information, how are you going to store it semantically and organize it from a logical perspective. And usually like when you bring in that data and you store it, it's not in its perfect end state, right? That's why there's all these great analysts and data scientists and machine learning people. So they have transformations and logical applications that they have to put on top of the data. So you have ingestion, you have storage, you have transformation, and then finally, I think what's really important to sales and marketing is activation, right? And that's kind of a new word, I guess, maybe not so much in 2025, but it's been a newer concept in the last 5 or 10 years. But it's just how, now that you have all that information curated and transformed the way that you want it, how do you activate it and get it back into the business systems where people are actually doing their work? So like those are the components that I think of. And I think like the turnkey solutions, they do all of those things. They might call them something different within each of their platforms, but those are the components I always think of: ingestion, storage, transformation, and activation.
Yeah, that's a great kind of way to think about it. And I think the activation piece is like sort of the most critical. Like, why are we even doing this, right? Why are we even
Exactly.
looking at our data? Because we want to make decisions with it. And we want to do better marketing. We want to be better at our jobs. We want to do, be more efficient in our sales pipeline or whatever the case may be. So that activation piece is so important. And I think the piece about getting everything all into one place is so critical. And I just had somebody ask me the other day, like, my opinion on whether I thought the Calendly meeting scheduler was better than the HubSpot meeting scheduler. And I said, listen, if you're not using HubSpot for anything else, there's no advantage to using the HubSpot scheduler. But if you are using HubSpot for everything else, it doesn't matter if Calendly's slightly better, just the fact that it's all in one and that you can see the data about how many meetings you're booking related to the ads you're running or the other things that you're doing, the sales sequences, then there's so much more value and opportunity for activation just having everything in one place.
Yes, you hit the nail on the head with the decision that most people have, right? It's like, do I go with convenience or do I go with best in breed solutions?
Hmm.
And again, maybe this is like the tech snobbery in me, right? I'm all about open source projects. And with like the advent of AI, things are just changing so much. So like whenever I'm building a data platform, again, whether it's for sales, for marketing, for sports betting, for healthcare, finance, whatever, I want to give my platform as much headroom to grow as possible. If I could see into the future, I would, I'd be Elon Musk or something. I don't know, but I can't. But what I can do is I can put myself in the best situation for my platform to evolve in the future. And so for me, again, from a technical position, it's easy for me to say this, but I always go towards the best in breed side of things. Again, the convenience factor makes a lot of sense. And like we talked about, if speed is the number one thing that you need, right? If you just got, Series A, 20-30 million dollars, like you don't have the time to hire a bunch of data architects and people to build your platform. You just need to go and prove product market fit or something. I totally understand not being able to take the time to do things in, the right way or the best of breed way. But I think like as soon as you get over that first hump, you start to realize that convenience for convenience sake really limits you. Like there's new tools. Like I think Clay is like a new tool that sales and marketing people are using, right? It's like you want to be able to like just incorporate a tool like that into your stack immediately, right? And if you have, if you're really dependent on HubSpot or Salesforce, right, you kind of get locked in to the way that they see business, which is like even more of a reason against convenience, right? So like with the best in breed solution, it'll gives you the most ceiling to your platform, and it actually allows you to build a platform that's bespoke to your business, which is like probably, the big iceberg there. But a little bit of a rant, but hopefully that makes sense.
No, the rants are important.
Yeah, of course.
And so, what nobody's recommending here, just to be clear, is that you're building your own CRM or that
Yeah.
you're building your own, like, I think that's a really important point you just made about the best in breed and that, creating your own kind of data platform is about a lot, like creating your own connections as opposed to relying on a solution that has all those connections already in place. Is that right?
100%. It's like weaving together something versus like a melting pot, right?
Mhm.
Where like, yeah, I'm not advocating, like to be super clear, do not go reinvent Salesforce.
Yeah.
Salesforce, the CRM space has been commoditized. There's plenty of companies out there that are the best in breed, right? It's about not using Salesforce as an ingestion tool, right? Not using Salesforce as a data warehouse, which a lot of people do, again, because of convenience and because, Salesforce, they have a lot of salespeople, and they're good at what they do, right? So they'll convince you that, oh yeah, Salesforce, with Einstein, you can do all of your BI and reporting in there. You don't even need to get like a BI tool. Oh, you don't need an ingestion tool. We have MuleSoft. You can connect to every source underneath the sun and bring it into house. But when you actually go down that road, you start to see that, a company like Salesforce, they do CRM really well. The other stuff they do okay, right? But it leaves a lot to be desired. So I guess picking on Salesforce is punching up, right? So I think I can do that. But that's a really good point, Jen. It's like, no, don't go create from scratch a CRM. It's about, okay, we know that Salesforce is the best CRM. We know that Marketo is one of the best marketing automation platforms, right? Like, and what other tools can we put in place that are best in breed and integrate well? So like we have, that composable data platform, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Rather than sort of saying, oh, well, the easiest thing to do is just buy into Pardot because it's part of Salesforce, right? Which
Been
is,
there.
in
Literally
there.
been there with Pardot. And again, like, was it convenient? Sure, like integrated with our Salesforce records. But as soon as we switched to Marketo, it's like we got so much more functionality. We were able to do things that we never were with Pardot. And it like unlocked so much business value. So again, that you have to be really careful that you don't fall into that convenience trap for too long.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So maybe what are some of the red flags that whatever stack you're sort of working with as a business today, or those integrations isn't working or isn't enough?
Again, really great question. I think, like, going back to the point I was making at the end of my previous rant, is that whenever you have these tools that are forcing you to think of your business using their blueprint, their schematics, that's like a huge red flag to me. Again, for instance, let's just say I work in a kind of a niche industry right now in sports betting and gaming and things like that. Not a lot of out of the box marketing and sales tools are built for that industry,
Mhm.
right? So if I don't think of my customers as like contacts and leads, and they're not going through like the normal B2B sales cycle that, a lot of these platforms facilitate out of the box, then that's a huge red flag to me, right? Like, I need a system that is either bespoke to my business or allows me to create objects that relate to my business. Again, like another example is like if I sell, I don't know, if my company sells natural dog food, right? Like, I need to be able to build a system that has those types of objects. Like, maybe there's not in HubSpot a concept of pets, like per contact. Like, but that's like really important to my business. And I need to make sure, my data and my business speaks in those terms and my systems speak in those terms. Like, as soon as you get into the world where it's like, oh, well, we can't facilitate that because we only do, leads, contacts, and opportunities, right? Like, when you have to start fitting your business into that, paradigm, that's a huge red flag to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And I feel like the like I don't know if this is a factor that you're thinking about. We're gonna get into like costs and stuff for building your own later, but
Yeah.
a lot of times you pay for the ability to for flexibility in these platforms, right? Like sure, you can build custom objects and custom connections and stuff like that. It's pretty clunky and it costs a lot of money to unlock that potential. And I find that if you're not using a system like that exactly the way they want you to use it, the support is very challenging, right? Like, well, how would I do X, Y, and Z? And the answer is always, well, you could do it however you want, which I don't want to do it however I want. I want somebody to tell me how to do it the right way. And I think you start to lose that whenever you're sort of operating outside of their ecosystem and their intended sort of method of doing things, like you're saying.
Yeah. Like, you're queuing me up really well. So, one of just I'm hanging on to what you just said about support,
Mm,
right? So with Salesforce, I've tried to do a lot of things in Salesforce I'm not supposed to do, right? And, Salesforce support is helpful. I've been part of companies that probably have like $1 million contracts with Salesforce. So we have dedicated professional services, right? We have like sales engineers, a lot. And even they always can't make what I want happen on the platform, right? So it's always limited. That's why I'm a big fan of open source software in general, because like if it's open source, it's free, it's curated by a community, and you have a plethora of knowledge and people to support you at any place in time. You can post on Stack Overflow. If you're using AI, it's going to have a lot of more context about an open source offering versus, something that's enterprise level and closed to the world, right? So that's an innate benefit that you get when you use more open source tooling, right? That again, maybe off the shelf, you have to do a little bit more work with. But like once you start to get deep in the trenches, starting to do the complex things that eventually every company wants to do with their sales and marketing data, like you have a lot of support. You have a lot of reference architecture out there because there's a whole free community that's using the tool. As soon as you switched over to like, these very expensive bespoke platforms, like, yeah, great. It's great for the basic things. They work out of the box. But when you want to start doing complicated things and complicated workflows, that's when you see how truly limited it is. And to your point, you're paying for it, right? From a licensing fee. You're probably paying for like some extra service on top of it. You have to pay people now to manage that system, right? It starts becoming really expensive for what you're getting. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, the people to implement it, the Salesforce engineers or I know some great ones. If anybody's looking for really smart, people that do amazing Apex coding, like there's a ton of them that exist because of exactly the problems that you're talking about. But maybe there's a better way to do it than trying to retrofit and rebuild Salesforce within the context of it.
For sure. I've been really mean to Salesforce for a little bit, but it's just, again, it's easy to punch up at the biggest contender, but I'm Salesforce certified. I've been to Dreamforce. It's the best conference that I've ever been to. I actually think that the platform Salesforce has built is like super flexible, right? And you can use it to basically do anything that you want to do. Again, I live in a world of data. I'm a little bit more tech agnostic. So as much as I've leaned into Salesforce, I've also, taken what they've built and just made it a little bit more agnostic of the Salesforce platform. So I just wanted to get that in there. If anyone from Salesforce is watching, I love the tool. I am a positive NPS score, but I just think a lot of people go down that road, unfortunately, and wind up in an interesting situation.
Yeah. Well, and I think it brings up a good point that like all of the technology that's out there, we just love to hate it, right?
Yeah.
None of it is perfect. It's all needs some level of customization. And, I've used Salesforce basically my whole career.
Yeah.
I onboarded Pardot before it was even owned by Salesforce, like
Yeah.
years and years of this stuff. We're HubSpot partners. So like we know these tools in and out. And I love to hate them, right? There's always customization that needs to happen. And oftentimes I'll do training, CRM training. So I'll say, I'm going to tell you how to use this system. And then I'm going to tell you how you use this system, because those are two different things, right?
Yes.
Like how the system was intended to be used and then your own sort of business's version of it, because your pipeline is different, your stages are different, your objects are different, and your rules are different, your requirements are different. And so that's super important. And there is a level that can be done within the context of these systems. But then, as you're saying, the flexibility and the sort of open-endedness of the possibilities, you probably need something more custom to, so you're not limiting yourself and hitting that ceiling like you were talking about.
Exactly. Again, a really good real world example of this is something basic like lead scoring, right?
Yeah.
That's something I've been asked to do every single every go-to-market organization I've come into. My first task is one of two things: building a high propensity account score, right? Like what accounts are the best fit for our product, and then lead scoring, MQL scoring, things like that. And you would think, oh, that's commoditized already, right? Out of the box, all of these tools have those systems. You can write heuristics. You could probably like use AI in these systems, things like that. But for me, you know, most of the people who are developers are learning SQL and Python, right? Like most data developers, data scientists, machine learning engineers, even AI, right? It's still floating around those languages. Now, it would be great if you knew someone who knows Apex, knows HubSpot really well, knows Python, knows SQL, knows all those languages, but that's like a unicorn. Like finding those people is really, really hard. I've
Mhm.
tried over the last 15 years to become one of those people, but I can tell you it's been a long and hard road. So just to connect it all is, so with lead scoring, you'd think, oh, just set it and forget it in HubSpot. But I can't tell you how many times like a CRO or an SVP of sales and marketing is like, well, we really, it's really important to us that in our lead scoring, we understand if this person is on GitHub and how many times they've committed to a certain open source repository because, we have the commercialized version. Like that's a very bespoke signal. It's not something that HubSpot's easily going to get. It's not something that they're going to easily be able to fold into their score. So it's like, going the route of taking all your data from HubSpot and Salesforce, putting it into a database, actually writing a script in SQL or Python to create that lead score, orchestrating that to run like, once a day, however many times you need. That slowly becomes the faster way to do things versus, talking to Kyle, figuring out what you have to do in HubSpot to get that information, talking to Jolene in Salesforce, figuring out how you're going to integrate it all, right? It quickly becomes an exercise in futility, even to do the basic things once they go beyond like the base level of complexity, right? So, and again, I think there's an intrinsic value on leaning into popular open source projects, popular programming languages versus trying to find like that Apex legend somewhere out there, which I know they exist, but if they're worth their weight in salt, they probably work somewhere already. And that's a whole thing. So again, a little bit of a diatribe, but it's about leaning into like popular languages, processes that are out there, right? Like a good machine learning engineer is going to be able to do 100x of what HubSpot can do. Yeah, and there's value in that.
Yeah, for sure. And also, if you've put all that effort into trying to retrofit or figure out how to make it work within HubSpot, then just wait for the new release of their lead scoring tool that totally throws away everything you did and launches something new out of your
Exactly.
control.
Yep. And you're always chasing. I mean, we have the same problem just in data, like agnostic, right? Like we have Databricks and Snowflake. They're behemoths. Every company right now is asking themselves, like, are we too married to this technology? So it's not just a sales and marketing problem, right? This is like a platform problem in general. And I blame all the salespeople because they're too good at their jobs, right? They get people hooked. So, you have to do your due diligence as a consumer for sure.
For sure, for sure. So let's talk about actually like building
Yeah.
your own. And what does that mean, building your own? What are we building? What are we not building? And what does that actually require? What kind of skill set do you need to hire for internally? What costs? What are the risks? Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. So again, when it comes to skill set, especially if you're building a, let's say, a CDP, marketing sales platform, like it all comes back to data. So like you need to hire people with good basic data skills. It's great to have people with specific specialties in these platforms, someone who's worked with HubSpot and their API before, or the Salesforce API. Like that is very valuable. But what's more valuable to me is just basic coding languages. Like, do you know SQL? Do you know Python? Do you know the basics of entity relationships? Can you draw that diagram and understand if it's a one-to-many relationship or a many-to-many relationship? And what does that mean as far as your data goes? So like when you're talking about skill sets, you're just hiring for like the best data analyst or engineer that you can. And again, that pool of people who have those skills is so much larger than if you're looking for a HubSpot admin who's really good, right? So that's the skill set. When you talk about costs, like the great thing about 2025 is the barrier to entry for all of this is much cheaper than it used to be,
Hmm.
right? Whether you're spinning up all your own AWS services or, you're buying tools off the shelf like Stitch or Fivetran or something like that. Generally, they all have like beginner or different tiers of service, right? And you can fall into one where you don't pay thousands of dollars a month. Maybe it's just a couple hundred, right? So I think that especially in 2025, the cost consideration is less than it used to be. I mean, the risk is that, you have someone like me that comes in, is very opinionated, cobbles together a system, and that no one else can understand, right? So that's one of the things that you have to make sure as you're going down that path. If you are going down that path of composability, that you're building things in a way that someone else can come in and understand. We know all the stats about, tenure at startups, right? Like I'm sure I've built things at startups, and the next person comes in is like, who's this guy, Dave Melillo? He made my job so much harder, right? But because of the way that he set things up, because of the system that he built. So those are some of the risks, right? But when you talk about like, what am I doing? Like I'm looking at, those areas like ingestion, like storage, like transformation, like activation, and I'm trying to figure out what the best vendors are. Like looking for cloud first, looking for vendors that have like freemium options, like where I can try to do, like really basic stuff, just working with 10 rows at a time, put together a POC that costs next to nothing, right? Because if you have to pay right out of the gate, I think that's a big red flag. But, again, I listed a couple of vendors, like when it comes to ingestion. When I was doing these things, there's companies like Stitch, there's companies like Fivetran, which are data tools, but they're pretty cheap. They're cloud, cloud first, and they integrate with everything that you can. When it comes to data storage, you can get a Postgres database for very cheap through AWS. For transformations, you have something like dbt. It's an open source platform, so you can run it for basically free. There's a cloud version as well. And then when it comes to data activation, there's a company that I love, and they're called High Touch, right? And they're very specific to the sales and marketing organizations and all the systems. So, again, if you need to get all of your data out of your data warehouse into ad platforms, CRMs, marketing automation platforms, or just to like SFTP, other places, right? High Touch has all that built out. So like you never have to think about building those point-to-point solutions. So I kind of just went through the tech stack that I would build today if I was doing it off the cuff. And hopefully that shows you that it doesn't take a PhD to put this stuff together.
It does take somebody with a certain skill set, though, and understanding, because I'm listening going, I don't know what half of those acronyms mean, right? But
Yes,
like,
yes.
I don't need to, right? So I think that's the important thing, is like understanding if you are going to hire somebody to build this in-house, what kind of person do you need to look for? What are they going to be, responsible for? Also, like, who are you collaborating with internally to make
Mhm.
sure you avoid that challenge of like, hey, this data person just came in and built something super smart that nobody can understand or nobody can use. Like, who are your internal partners that you're collaborating with to make sure you're not just building something that's best in class tech and, works seamlessly, but actually is going to meet that need of that activation, that last step, and people are actually going to use it? How do you make sure people are going to use it?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think I was probably not as great at this early on in my career that I am now, but you really have to work backwards. Like you have to be working with your leaders in sales and marketing to understand what they want and the level at which they need things, right? So that's who I start with, because if they're not happy, I don't get my funding, I can't do anything that I want to do, right? So they have to get what they need. If the most important thing to them is, building a transparent conversion funnel and reports in Salesforce, that's where you have to sink in your time, right? And then like you go from layers down to that, right? Like working with account representatives has been one of my bread and butter areas, but those people need vastly different things than my executive stakeholders need, right? So it's like working down that stakeholder tree from most senior to lower levels of the organizational hierarchy, and making sure that they're actually getting what they need. And so what does that mean? So let's go through the lead scoring thing again. Like at the top of that organizational hierarchy, again, they just might want to see reports in Salesforce, things like that, like very high level aggregated things. But that next level down, like what the account reps always ask me is, Dave, how did you get to that score? I don't care if that that lead is at 100. Like I need to be able to see every touch point that happened to get them to 100 and to a qualified lead, right? So you have to think about it. They need to see the same information as my executive stakeholders, but they just need to see it at a different granularity. But if, the rep is seeing different numbers than the executive, you start to get yourself into the worst situation, which is spending more time reconciling data than using it for business activities, right? So I think you could check yourself at every level by making sure that all these people get what they need, right? If it's just a black box, if you're just sending out reports without others interacting with it, without them giving you feedback. And when I say others, I mean the people who are actually using your data to make business decisions, then you're doing it incorrectly. Like that feedback loop should be there all the time. You should be going to sales kickoff, selling, your composable data platform. You should be working side by side with the folks who are doing forecasting, with the folks who are looking at the funnel for conversion metrics. And you should say, like, do you have everything you need? And if you do that right, you will build a system that everyone can understand and contribute to, and not a black box that only a super technical person can work within.
Yeah. Yeah. Those partnerships are so important. And you said something so critical in the middle there about like spending more time reconciling your data than using it.
Yeah.
Man, do I see that all the time. And that, like, sometimes there are companies that do have these really sophisticated sort of data platforms going, and all of their like kind of key metrics are in a Google sheet
Yeah.
because they have to be pulled out, and well, that's not exactly accurate, and this one doesn't match that, and I don't understand why, and the person who built it isn't here anymore. And that creates such a challenge when everything is so manual. And I guess one of the things that's like a question that's bringing up for me is kind of like, where does this responsibility sit in, and like, how is it the same or different or collaborating with RevOps?
Yeah. It's funny that you asked that. It's almost like a volley back to you. It's like, well, where does RevOps sit? It's funny. I've been pulled in to do the stuff that I've done with data at organizations from marketing, where like
Mhm.
RevOps has sat. I've been pulled in, and reported to like the SVP of sales where RevOps has sat. So yeah, I think it matters where it's coming from. And yeah, I'm not sure exactly how to answer that.
Yeah.
But
It's,
yeah,
I don't know that anybody really knows how to
yeah,
answer it, because RevOps is, I see it sitting in so many different functions within
yes,
businesses, and also tasked with very different things. And
yes,
so oftentimes, like when I'm thinking about RevOps, I'm thinking about someone who's doing what you're describing,
that's
right?
right.
And is in a really smart way, kind of saying, like, here is all the data in an automated and reliable way that I'm confident in the decisions that I'm making based on that data.
I
Like
know.
that's the dream. That's what I expect from RevOps. But so often RevOps is brought in to reconcile and clean up data, and that just is, feels less effective to me.
Yeah. Usually like the ops functions are hired as business people to come and like look at Clary, right? And then yell at someone, whether it be Clary or like an engineer, to make Clary work the way that they want to. That's what I've seen. Now, I've been fortunate enough in my career that I've had leaders where I've been hired as a technical person and I've become the marketing ops person and I've become the sales ops person or the rev ops person because they understand like that Venn diagram that you just explained, right? Okay, so you need someone who understands the business, because if they don't, like they're not going to really understand how revenue relates and how the data relates, but you also need that data side so that this person can tell you, hey, we've been working in this spreadsheet, but as soon as we get to 1,000,000 rows, like we're not going to be able to work in this spreadsheet anymore. Right. So like if we want to be able to like take this to the next level, we have to actually get a database. Like that has been like one of the most basic things that I've done everywhere I've gone. To your point, the business runs off of a Google sheet, but as it gets to 500,000 rows and then it gets slow. No one can update it anymore. The pivot tables don't work, right? Then it gets to 800,000. No one can export it onto their computer anymore. And then it gets to 1,000,000, and then all of a sudden you can't add new records. You start having all these processes just to accommodate for that, right? That's the type of knowledge that you need. You need someone who comes in, knows that limitation, and is like, hey, all we need to do is put this in a database, and our problems are solved.
Right.
So
And I imagine the time, right? Imagine if instead of all the time it takes to take the data out of Salesforce or HubSpot and put it in that Google sheet was actually spent building something,
yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
looking at the MQL score, like researching accounts. That's what I try to advertise with everything that I do with data. It's like we want to automate everything until only the fun stuff is left. And with AI, that's becoming like a very poignant topic,
Mhm.
right? It's like, oh, analysts are very scared. I'm going to get replaced. It's like, no, you're not going to get replaced. What's going to happen is that we're going to automate all the terrible things that you don't want to do. And we're going to free you up time so that you can do those higher level functions, so that you can actually do very deep analysis versus wrestling with like 15 spreadsheets that are all formatted differently but have the same data. And how do I put that all together? Right? Like over the past 10, 15 years, we've been solving that problem. But now with AI coming in, we should be able to get to that future where like I'm not just clicking buttons, hacking away at something. I'm actually, contributing business value with like my ideas, with my analysis and things like that. So it's changing very rapidly, but I think it's changing for the better.
Yeah, I think so too. And, I say that a lot. I work with my former university where I went to school, but to work with marketing students. And they're always asking like, what's the thing? What's the like skill that I really need? And I always tell them like, you need to know how to analyze data,
Yeah.
because when you're thinking about marketing strategies and tactics and all the fun stuff that you describe that you actually want to spend your time on, that's changing constantly. The way that we market today is so different from the way we marketed 20 years ago. And the only thing that is consistent is if you know how to read and understand data and performance, then you can make smart decisions and do fun stuff and experiment and take risks. But you're never going to like, you don't want to get expert in like building websites with HTML. I mean, that's what I was studying in college, was
Yeah.
like how to build websites in HTML. People don't do that anymore. You don't have to do that anymore,
No,
really.
you just yell at AI until it does it for you. I mean, with the advent of Cursor, Windsurf, the Chat GPT, all of these like great coding tools, like I can make like a video game in a weekend just by like prompting a system. So it's completely insane. But what hasn't changed is exactly what you nailed, right? It's knowing like what analysis I can apply to this situation. And again, like that's where like data science really is a thing, right? Like you should know all the different algorithms that you can apply to a situation, whether it be like a decision tree, some k-means clustering, some deep learning, right? You can take the output from all those models and create consensus. Like when younger people or people who are just getting into the business ask me the same thing, I'm like, you need to know that there are 100 different ways to solve the problem, and pick between those 100 different ways to gain consensus, right? That's what you're always looking for when it comes to analysis. I analyze the problem 5 different ways and it's telling me something consistent using these 5 methods. Like to me, that's when I really know that I'm onto something. When like whether it's using a pivot table, using a machine learning algorithm, and using AI, all triangulate and point to the same answer. So like I always talk about consensus in any of the classes that I teach. And again, not just for sales and marketing, but also for any data problem, right? So I think that's really important. To your point, knowing how to analyze data and knowing how to draw consensus from all the analysis tools that you're using.
That's an important word, consensus.
Yes.
It's interesting because I think, there's often different ways you could interpret certain data, or it's usually the people, right? People have different definitions of what success looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another whole nother alignment problem we could talk about in another episode. But that consensus of like, yes, we're all in agreement. We, as in the data points, or we, as in the humans analyzing the data, agree that this is working or this is not, and that there is a path to optimize or to turn off or to turn on or to turn up something. That consensus is so important. I love that word.
100%. And that's probably how I've gotten all of my jobs recently, is like I explain, okay, if you're trying to score accounts, you're trying to look through leads, find that diamond in the rough, you need to collect 500 signals. Maybe I'm being a little bit dramatic, but you need a wide variety of signals, because if an account, a lead, whatever your business object is just peaking on one signal, right? Like, oh, they viewed our website yesterday, let's go get them. I mean, that's frequency. That's one element of the score. Like, you need to understand if they look like a good fit, if they just got funding. Like, there's a million different data points that you should be using to drive consensus. And then when you see multiple green lights, like within your model, within your analysis, that's when you attack. I think, again, speaking to something that you just said, when people focus in on that one signal to rule them all, like I think you just wind up truncating, your ability for success.
Yeah, for sure. So my last question for you before we wrap up, like, how do you future proof your marketing data decisions as you grow? You start at the beginning mentioning that ceiling. Like, how do you make sure you're not hitting that ceiling with when you don't have a crystal ball, you don't know what's coming?
Yeah, just think of define your business with ephemeral concepts, right? That sounds like very complicated, but again, just going back to, if I sell dog food, like, don't think leads and contacts if like pets are the most important object. Like, you should have that drawn in your data model, and you should work to make sure that you're focusing on how you can get the best view of pets from your data as they're connected to customers, and not be forced into the way that these systems see your business. Like, I'll always double down on that. I think anytime that systems are driving your processes or how you define your business, like, you're starting to get down like the wrong path. So just define your business using ephemeral objects. They could just be squares. It's like pets and types of food and supplements. Like, these are all the words and that we use. These are the concepts that we need to know from our data. And if you just align on that as your North Star, instead of the leads, contacts, so on and so forth, that are, going to be pushed on you from these systems, I think you'll be fine no matter what happens and what choice you make. So
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining today and talking about this stuff. This is complex stuff, and I think it's a little bit mysterious to a lot of people. And so I know that some of this was very much demystified for me today. I appreciate your time.
no, thank you for having me, Jen. I always love talking about this stuff. So thanks again.
Of course. Make sure you're following Dave on LinkedIn. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to Marketing Demystified wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time for more conversations that help demystify the complex